Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. It's Sunday the 27th of November. What a week of football upsets we've had so far, Kev. Saudi, Japan and also Iran. What a shake-up. What are your thoughts?
I know. The football world is shaking as we speak. It's like Wales got hammered by Iran on Friday. And who knows? Let's just hope the Cup continues to have some surprises, because it's interesting, isn't it? It makes it more interesting.
I mean, there's no such thing as an easy game of football. Everybody thinks that the bigger league teams or the bigger teams have the right to beat these smaller countries and these Asian countries and sort of Middle Eastern. But the reality is they're all getting pretty good these days. I mean, Saudi was a shock. The Argentina game for me was a highlight so far, to see Saudi Arabia. And then they announced a national holiday the following day, which I thought was comical.
And the Iran game was interesting because it was in the morning. Qatar was boiling hot. Yeah. And the Iranians didn't have a problem with it, and the Welsh boys were sweating like there was no tomorrow. So it was like talking about sunshine.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, we've actually got sunshine today, which is unusual. And I saw an article on the BBC that said that a Welsh hospital, talking about keeping it on the Wales theme, a Welsh hospital has become the first in the UK to be directly powered by its own solar farm. I think it's saving about £480,000 in energy costs on an annual basis. So do we know anyone who can talk solar to us?
Quite a few, but I know a South African man who can talk about it.
I know a gentleman by the name of Hanno Pengilly, CEO of Ncondezi Energy. Welcome, Hanno.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome.
So do you want to tell us a bit about solar, or a bit about Ncondezi?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's we are in the process of, I guess you could say, an energy revolution, right? It's difficult in today's world to look at the news or read in the newspaper, and miss something that's not talking about, new solar, new wind, new hydrogen energy, all forms of sustainable power, etc. And so it is a very exciting time. And what you're seeing, what you were just talking about now in terms of hospital powering itself, this is another part of the transition that's going on here, in that we're having a shake-up in grid infrastructure in a way that we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. And I think what's exciting on the solar side is that we've gotten to a stage now where solar energy is by far the cheapest form of energy on the planet. Condition specific, but generally it's not very complicated infrastructure. If you're mounting it onto a roof, it's fairly easy. If you're mounting it on the ground, you've got to stick some stakes in the ground and make sure that your thing doesn't fall over, and there's a bit of cleaning to do depending on where you are. But essentially it's very simple infrastructure. It's modular, very simple to install. It's now at a cost point where I think, it's no longer a piece of saying, oh, it's nice to have some solar here. It's nice to brag about having some renewable energy that we're consuming. It's now at a stage where I think it's almost essential for businesses to look at an energy strategy as to how you can integrate solar. And I know it's not nice for you guys sitting over in the UK right now, but it's fascinating sitting as sitting in from a position of South Africa, where we've been in an energy crisis for the better part of 10 years. We're watching how Europe is handling its own energy security issues. And, you're seeing a big mix of, you're starting to see the importance of energy security. I mean, everybody sits there and turns on a light or plugs in their phone, and they don't really think about, it's just magic and it's there, right? But the second it's not there, and the second you get told, by the way, there might not be power later today, or your energy cost might jump, 30-40%, it suddenly becomes very interesting and important. And I guess what we're seeing in Africa is, Africa is basically in a position, it's we call it, it's the leapfrog effect that's basically happening in Africa at the moment. And what you saw, very similar to what you saw with the cell phones, and fixed line telecom. In Africa, fixed line telecom had a much faster penetration rate than the rest of the world. And that wasn't because it was cheaper in Africa. That was just because there was no fixed line infrastructure in poor or rural destinations. And it was much easier to plant a couple of towers there. We're starting to see the same thing with energy. you're starting to see a lot of people becoming focused on how they can resolve their own energy needs and provide their own energy security, coupled with this new technology that's coming along. And, again, Africa is blessed with a lot of sun. I mean, it's not news to anybody.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much primed to take advantage of it. And I guess you could say it's sort of the last frontier from energy at the moment, from an energy perspective.
So would it be safe to say that a project like that, a solar project in South Africa or Mozambique, is obviously going to be more efficient than in the Northern Hemisphere, in the UK? Where, I mean, you hear people say that today I didn't generate much electricity from the solar powers on the roof. I mean, how much does it affect the weather in terms of that? Obviously, the number of hours of daylight is a factor, but is it also the quality and the intensity of the sun as well?
Look, it's a number of factors that come in, but certainly, your energy resource in Africa is a lot higher. I mean, you've even got something, I forget the name of it, but you've got it's called a albedo factor, which is actually the reflection from the ground cooking the panel from behind that you've got to look into. So you've also got to look at what's the color of the roof, what's the color of the soil. There's so many factors that have an impact, but certainly Africa is a great destination to do it because it's also got the right balance, because you can't get too hot either. If you get too hot, the panels start to overheat and they don't perform properly. But certainly, I think the point is you can get more energy generation per given day in Africa could an equivalent place, I think, up in the Northern Hemisphere. So from a cost perspective, a cost per, your cost per generated, the amount of energy you generate per dollar of installed capacity is much higher. So that the economics are definitely there. The other thing that you're looking at in Africa, which makes it a big difference, is that the demand is there. We've got real power issues here. Again, you're seeing it in Europe for the first time now, where you're probably going to see huge fundamental shifts in energy strategy to say, we need energy security. And again, Africa hasn't had energy security.
No.
And the benefits of what we're going through now is that I think you've got the need for energy security, the need for low cost energy, because these are not rich nations, right? The average person can't afford to pay the energy bills that the average person in Europe or a developed economy can spend. So it needs to be low cost, it needs to be reliable. And the final thing is, as I say, you've got this demand for it. You don't have an alternative. Right?
I mean, load shedding has become a real part of your day, hasn't it? Or your year. I mean, I think I heard something crazy like in South Africa that there's about 100 days of load shedding have continued to happen.
It's at a stage now where we've got apps. Everybody has an app on their phone. The app tells you which hours of the day you don't have power. For us now, I mean, South Africa has gone from a place of having excess power and having to actually basically sell power at massive discounts to neighboring countries, suddenly having an energy shortfall. And that was just poor planning and infrastructure investment in the late the early 2000s. But look, it's now a case where we're told to expect load shedding probably, I would say, about 6 hours a day now. And so what that also starts to get you doing is that's again where it's changing the market. You're turning around, you're saying, well, can I rely on the state to provide me with power? Or do I have to take this into my own hands? And we've been forced to do it. So it hasn't been a nice to have to do this, but, and then a lot of places have had to run on diesel generators, which if in a way, diesel, this has been almost an artificial impediment to Africa's competitiveness. And if I can tell you, running a diesel generator, the numbers here in Africa, it's 4 times the price of grid infrastructure. So you imagine you've got to run a generator for most of the day to power all of your infrastructure. So your energy costs out the gate are 4 times higher than everyone else's. The advent of this renewable energy, and particularly solar being cheaper, is really it's a huge opportunity here. And basically, you're seeing a lot of businesses now focus on how they can look to procure more renewable energy, either themselves or through developers such as us, with larger projects that can generate economies of scale that can give them a more competitive tariff. But, this is where the market is going, and you're seeing it move there rapidly. And also, in addition to that, with the cost of batteries falling, your issue with solar and, solar is not baseload. So anybody running around, and I'm not going to be the guy who tells you that renewable energy is the solution. I mean, it's a huge advantage and it's fantastic, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that it's what they call an intermittent power. Now, an intermittent power means that when the wind isn't blowing and the sun's down, you can't rely on it. So, I think when greenies start advocating this stuff, and then you ask them, well, how are you charging your cell phone at night? In parts of Africa, you need base load, and base load is the reliable 24-hour power Now, there is a way to allow renewable energies, particularly solar and wind, to have a greater impact on base load, and that's through storage. And that's where everyone's getting very excited about storage and bolting on storage to renewable assets, either for solar, because one of the crazy parts is that energy usage during the middle of the day is actually not our highest demand. Our highest demand is in the mornings and the evenings when everyone wants to fire up their kettles. It's a funny thing, but that is, and the issue is the sun isn't necessarily up at that time. So, if you can store power during the day that then you can use at times of higher peak demand, if you will, that allows solar to have a much greater penetration, if you will, into the overall energy demand, and same with wind. And that's something that we've been, if I can say our history, Ncondezi, people that know us or have heard of us before, we were historically very much involved with coal. We had a coal exploration license. We looked at building a coal-fired power station. And although we got that very far advanced, we could see, the market changing. We could see where capital was flowing, the movement of capital towards renewable energy, the movement of governments to want to transition to a more sustainable generation mix, if you will. And what we did is we didn't just, it wasn't for us to just turn around and say, okay, we're going to just flip and suddenly, change hats. We actually, just before COVID, we financed a solar battery fully off-grid system for a luxury hotel on one of the islands in Mozambique. And that was a much smaller project. It was about a $1.1 million project, but we used it as an opportunity to basically level up our experience and our knowledge with solar and storage. And actually, it was the first Tesla power pack we installed in Mozambique, and it was so all exciting stuff and a buzz. And basically, what happened is we took this hotel, we got it. It was running on gas generators. So, it was piped gas from Mozambique, which means even cheaper than diesel. But even with the gas generators, with the solar and the battery, we were able to undercut the cost of their energy by 25%.
There are many of these situations. I mean, I think there's a company down there called CellCube as well, which are trying to produce the batteries so that, the places in South Africa can actually store the energy while they are offline, if you like. And there's one of the big, the world's biggest rutile project is actually in Mali, and they're talking about doing a complete solar farm to basically supply the energy to do the mining. So yeah, it's going to happen, I'm sure. And as you say,
happening, Kevin. I mean, I don't want to interrupt. It's already happening. I mean, it's if you look at some of the biggest mining houses in the world, they are all installing massive power plant facilities here in these African countries. And this is very, and again, the reason it's happening, and I guess you probably feeling it for the first time in Europe, the urgency to secure power when your energy security is put at risk. The impact it has on people's lives when you have to rely on expensive forms of energy, right? Yeah. Africa has been here for 5-6 years, and the problem is we just haven't had an alternative. We finally got an alternative that is, and when I say we didn't have an alternative, we didn't have a cost competitive alternative. I think that's the important message here. We're now at a stage where these things are commercially attractive right out the gates. You immediately start saving money the second you turn one of these things on. You've got the added benefit of all the ESG benefits on top of that now. But what we've seen with Ncondezi is just it's a different world to what we were dealing with trying to do a fossil fuel based power station. It's just the infrastructure is simpler. It's easier to install. The financing that's available for it is hugely competitive. And at the end of the day, you sort of feel like you're riding a wave, if you will, where there's capital that wants to put itself in this place. There's off-takers that want to secure more renewable energy. It's just a very different ball game, and certainly we're very excited about it because we commissioned a project late this time last year, the solar battery project. It taught us a lot. It demonstrated to government that we could do this. It was the first project of its type in Mozambique, a fully off-grid system. And really what we did is we looked at we'd done a lot of work with our coal-fired power station, a lot of good work. And we basically did some preliminary work earlier in the year to see, could we transition it from fossil fuel to solar? Now, again, we didn't want to just jump out and say we're thinking about it without any substance. So we did the initial work. It said it does. It came up with some good indications that this will work. We then went to government and the relevant authorities and said, look, guys, we'd like to look at this in a serious way. They fortunately looked at us and said, because of the work that we've done historically here, they allowed us to do a study up to 300 megawatts, which is a fairly large facility, and certainly larger than anything else that's been given permission in Mozambique. And basically with that, we were able to fast track a feasibility study in under 6 months, which is complete and announced recently, basically confirming it is technically feasible. The economics are attractive, which is all great for us. And the next piece is just to secure the offtake, which is is a major milestone. I mean, once you secured an offtake on this, as I said to you earlier on, the power projects are priced on 20 to 30 year offtakes. So when you secured your cornerstone buyer, really everything else sort of falls into place from there. And what we've done is we put ourselves in a position now where we can seriously talk to these guys. And where we are in that process is we are already talking to a few parties that have expressed interest in potentially becoming off takers. They've waited for us to finish the studies to show them that we've actually got something real here. And basically, I think over the next, I'd say probably we're going into the Christmas period. In this part of the world, that's our summer, that's our end of year summer holidays.
That's right. We're all going on a summer holiday.
Yeah. So sorry to say that to you guys. But it basically means there's a bit of a shutdown between mid-December to mid-Jan. But yeah, I think we're well positioned to start securing that offtake during Q1 of this year with the work that we've done. And again, I think for people sitting in the UK, it's very topical right now, this idea of energy security and needing to do things. And really, I think the African story speaks for itself in that. Everyone knows they're desperate for power in this part of the world. Everyone knows they've got great solar resources. And it really is a final frontier in terms of the energy game down here. So very exciting.
So tell us about the feasibility study and some of the numbers. I mean, 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts. The feasibility study was done. And it shows, it does show a very clear economies of scale as you move up the scale. In terms of profitability and cost per unit of electricity. So, are you shooting for the stars here? You're hoping to get the finances to go ahead straight away and build 300 megawatts, or what is the plan?
So, I'm probably a little conservative with this stuff. Is there the demand? Is there the infrastructure to do 300 megawatts? Yes, there is. The transmission infrastructure is there. The benefits of where our project is we are right smack back in the middle of what's it's an energy distribution hub where we are in Tete in Mozambique. There are direct transmission lines into South Africa from there, which is the largest energy consumer on the continent. There are direct transmission lines into Zimbabwe, which connect up to Zambia and the rest of the SADC region. They're currently building a transmission line very close to our concession to connect Malawi into the overall Southern African grid. So, this is, and the reason I'm saying that is you can't just put a 300 megawatt power station anywhere where there's sunshine. You've got to be able to send that power somewhere. Now, either you've got to have an end user right next door to you who can consume that amount of power. And 300 megawatts is it is a lot of power. I'm trying to think. The other day someone was telling me the island of Guernsey consumes about 100 megawatts. So if you put that in perspective, so it's Guernsey's it's a significant amount of power that you've got to find a home for, and so being positioned in a part of the Southern African continent where you've got access to transmission infrastructure that can get that power to customers is very important. From our perspective, we need to go there and test off-takers. Are there the off-takers that can do 300 megawatts? Yes, there are. Are we going to go out there and hang our hats on trying to get 300 out the gate? Probably not. I think, our focus now, we know we need to secure a minimum of 100 megawatts. If we can get more, we'll definitely go for it. We're certainly not constrained. There's nothing constraining us looking at a bigger phase if the demand is there. But I think given what we've seen in the region, typically the larger projects in South Africa have been installed in 100 megawatt phases as well. So if you look at the precedents, I think more than likely you'll hit 100 megawatts out the gate. But again, important message there. Once you've done the first 100 megawatts, you've done a lot of the ground infrastructure. You've connected into the grid. There's a lot of setup capital, if you will, that you've put in place to better position you for the next 100 megawatts. And just to be clear, they're not 100 megawatt. They don't come out of the box in 100 megawatt units. They come out of the box in whatever you want. It's modular down to 2 megawatts. So if it turns out being 120 or 150, obviously the bigger it is, it all comes down to the off-taker. If the quality off-taker is there, if they want 100 or if they want 300, that's what we will go for. 100 is probably an easier place for everybody to get comfortable as a first step. Although certainly the people that we've been talking to have indicated they would be looking for more than that, which is why we looked at the larger plants. So we're comfortable the demand is there. We're comfortable that the transmission infrastructure is there to do it. And as you can see from the announcement on the numbers, there's some fairly chunky numbers there. And I guess the important message to say to you on that is this is reliable income streams. These are priced in PPAs for 25 years. This is not power that's going into an open market grid system where everyone's bidding to see who can sell their price to the grid operator. Those are locked in tariffs that are generally fairly tricky to get out of. And as you can see, the cash flow generation from them over that 25 years is fairly exciting. And one of the numbers that we put in the announcement, which the power game is, I think, very new for investors on the stock exchange. It can be very confusing. Hell, I'm still learning after 5-6 years of being in the space. It's very difficult to understand what is a megawatt. What does it actually mean to you as the investor? What does it generate? And so one of the things it was very important for us to show, and obviously when you're showing these numbers, we've got to be very cautious not to prejudice our negotiations. We can't tell you what the tariff is because we've still got to go and fight that out with an off-taker. We can't tell you what each individual piece of CapEx is because we've still got to go and negotiate that with the EPCs or the construction companies. We've got numbers in here we will stand behind and there's contingency in them. But what we wanted to do is show investors what the bottom line looks like. And what we provided for you, for people in that RNS is a breakdown of what the theoretical fully diluted cash flows are to Ncondezi. Now that's basically assuming Ncondezi doesn't put in another dollar to build this thing, and basically just lets a strategic come in and fund the project. And to be clear, that's what happens. That is a very standard practice in this space. Typically, when you've got the offtake signed off, or you could even wait later and you can get all the financing with the banks done, and you can bring in a financial investor that just wants their annuity income. Typically a strategic or a financial investor will come in, position themselves in the equity to get their target return. And the developer will dilute down. Now, typically, if you don't put another penny in, you basically dilute down to somewhere between, it can be anywhere from 10 to maximum 30% of the equity in the project. And what we've tried, and the numbers roughly look like that. There's obviously other things going there, but you can see there, if we don't put another dollar into that 100 megawatt project, it'll generate between $30 and $44 million over a 25-year life. And now that's, in my view, that's fairly exciting information if we're feeling confident that we're not going to have to put much more money into this. And my experience in this space is that once you have a credible off-taker, there are plenty of people that will come forward and look to manage the project on from there, for the simple reason that you have huge amounts of capital that has been allocated towards sustainable energy investing in Africa, across the world. This capital needs to find a home. And you can either look and mess around with small 20, there are not too many big 100 megawatt projects floating around that allow you to deploy that capital. And you can imagine it's just as difficult to deploy capital into a 10 megawatt plant as it is a 100 megawatt plant. For capital, as long as there's a bankable off-taker here, this project ticks a lot of those boxes for financial or strategic.
But at 300 megawatts, this project is 6 times the diluted cash flow without you putting another dollar in. So it's, the economies of scale are doubling the amount of cash flow that can be generated.
Yes, so it gets even more exciting, 100%.
It is far, far more interesting as it goes up. But I mean, you're valued at sort of £3 million as a market capitalization as we speak. You have just raised some cash, so you have some cash. So to have a £3 million market capitalization with, by the looks of things, potential to have somewhere in the region of $1.5 million a year of free cash flow revenue seems like you're quite cheap. What do you think?
For sure. Look, I think the key here is that the next milestone is going to de-risk this investment significantly. And I think that's an important message there. I think if you're looking in the power space, if you're looking at making any power infrastructure investment, the first thing you should be looking at, well, obviously, as I said before, you got to check technically it's sound. You got to make sure that there's sunshine to charge the thing or there's wind. But the next piece is who's buying the power. How reliable is that person buying the power? Because you're generating this return over a long period of time. And so if you are able to secure a reliable buyer of the power, you are taking a significant amount of risk of delivery on this project. An important message for me to highlight is we're now at a stage where we can have those serious discussions with off-takers. Before we have a feasibility study done, it ticks the boxes to confirm the technical viability. We've updated a commercial model which shows the economics and the target tariff. And it's now a case of we can present a number to an off-taker to say, look, this is what you could be paying for a renewable off-take. And with the scale that we're looking at, we're confident we're presenting numbers that are more competitive than anyone else is offering at the moment, which again, for me, that separates us from any of the other players in the space in that we've been able to look at a much larger system.
Okay, so you have a feasibility study, you have the land, I take it, you have the permissions to do it. Maybe there's some environmental permissions maybe still required. If you didn't manage to get an offtake, how much do you think somebody would buy you for the project in its current state?
So that's a very interesting question. Typically, what people would do is they'd look at your historical development spend on the project. And that's a very important number because if someone was looking to buy a project like this, or any project, we saw that when we were dealing with strategics looking to buy 60% of our coal projects, the first thing they want to look at is how much of your development spend is, what's the right word, audited, if you will. Yeah. And that's important for them because when you fund the project, the banks will refinance that development spend. That's built into the way the infrastructure projects, you get your audited development expenditure refunded to you as part of your development risk. So the first port of call that someone would look at is they would look at the development expenditure on this project. And there's been a significant amount of that because although the solar project's only really been going for 12 months, the solar project's only been able to deliver a feasibility study in such short order because it's taken advantage of work that was done on the coal power plant. So for example, the things that you've been talking about, we have the land access rights. We've done the transmission connection studies. We have our environmental studies were done for a coal-fired power station. You can imagine to upgrade those for solar, it's the more favorable
to downgrade them for solar, really.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of good work that's been done there, and that's probably where we would target. In terms of that's where an investor would look at it first.
So what's that worth? I mean, give us a ballpark.
So development spend on all of that. God, you put me on the spot here with this one.
That's why we call it the roast.
So look, it depends. Again, I would say if we've got right now, there are two key milestones that we're trying to achieve. The one is the offtake. The other is to get permission to connect to the grid. If we've got a project that's ready to go and it's fully permitted, etc., and it just needs an offtaker, you'd probably look to try and sell that at a price per megawatt, if you will. And I'm just relating there to be clear
to the market. What's the market value at the moment?
So the market value at the moment is in rands.
So per megawatt. Per
megawatt, look, it used to be around 300,000 euros a megawatt in South Africa.
Okay.
That's what they used to sell fully permitted projects at. So, however, those numbers have come down significantly.
They've declined.
Yeah.
So take 100,000 euros for 100,000. Oh, sorry, for only 100 megawatt, even though you've got permits for 300. So you're being as conservative as physically possible, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
This gives us 10 million euros. Okay, converted into British pounds, 9 million pounds. So, or thereabouts. Your current market.
That's the thing. So that's where you would fight. That's where you would sit with someone and you would say, okay, guys, what have you still got to do on this project? Right? We've done all the work. You've got to find an off-taker. Yes, there's a risk, but you've got a fully baked, ready project to just, to install once you solve that. So, yeah, we would definitely have a fight on, well, not a fight. I mean, there'd be a heated negotiation on that. But typically, those are the ranges you'd look at. Now, I'm hesitant to say a figure. I don't think you're wrong with the ballpark. I mean, to give you perspective, our coal-fired power station, we did an audit on, and there were about $20 million of historical costs on the coal-fired power station. Now, a large part of those can't be transitioned to the solar. However, there are, if you assume at least half of those costs can be attributable, again, you come to the $10 million. And again, you talk about the numbers there, 100,000 euros a megawatt, you come to a similar number. So that's how we would look at it. Again, it depends where the market is, and it depends on a few other things that we've got to achieve. But our focus right now, to be clear, is we're not developing this thing because we're trying to figure out who the off-taker is. We've identified the off-takers. We know exactly who they are. To be fair, we've gone into NDAs with a couple of them already.
Yeah, I think what I'm doing here with yourself is to try and give the investors a view of what you're worth now. There's a risk, and they've got to pay that risk premium now. But is that risk premium worthwhile? In other words, am I going to treble my money? Am I going to, tenfold my money? Well, basically, by the looks of it, if you get an off-taker, you should be 10 times the price you are now.
Depending on the off-take size, you're going to see there's definitely a multiple re-rating that should come off the back of that immediately. And again, your big difference with a power project versus, say, a mining project is that, once you get, our de-risking is not necessarily when a mine is fully de-risked when it enters production, right? Yeah. And it's got a few years operating. I'm not saying a power plant isn't fully de-risked, but the point is it's mainly de-risked by the time you hit financial close. When the bank signs the letter to finance this thing, you are largely de-risked at that stage, for the simple reason that it's basic infrastructure to install. It's generally fully insured. The guys who are building it are, you basically siphoned off all the risks of delivering this thing onto other parties. But what it means is when you're looking at that NPV number and you're saying, oh, well, I'm only going to realize my benefit, if we were a mining company, you'd say, well, we're only going to see the benefits of this thing when it's operational.
Yeah, you can't compare it to a mine because in a mine you're looking for something. In this case, the only problem you've got is if too many clouds appear, and ultimately that's unlikely to happen because it's in Mozambique, So,
but again, so your main thing is when you look at those NPV numbers that we put out there, you basically got to say, well, what sort of discount am I applying to those for the different phases that they're talking about? And I would say that the offtake is one of the largest risk mitigators, if you will, to deliver that NPV. If you've got a creditworthy offtake, the next, again, emphasis on creditworthy, that means the banks will finance them, right? And that means that, once you've got the offtake, you go to the financing, and once you've got the financing, you go to construction.
Yeah. No, and as you say, in these type of things, financial close means it's basically a done deal. And we're doing stuff like this for gas peakers in the UK with some other companies. Mast is a good example. In that situation, that once financial closure happens, bang, it's done. There is no more risk involved other than maybe some building risk. But at the end of the day, you've built an agreement in that they have to build it for X amount. So that's it. It's done.
Now, look, it's a different animal. And again, what I would say, just to add to that point, again, the difference with Africa to the developed markets, say in the UK with the peak plants, we're not competing in an open market to sell power. So what we're doing here is when you've signed that off, that's why we can put numbers in a document here to say the cash flows we're presenting, and I think those are the market rates that people are signing off power contracts at. In Europe, you have to take a view on where the power price might be in 5 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to worry about whether or not they're going to be subsidies. Subsidies are still going to be there, etc. So you've definitely got. Look, you're still in Africa. Don't get me wrong. You are still in Africa. That carries a risk. That carries its own set of risks with it. But what you're looking at with Mozambique and what we're trying to do, and again, I'd emphasize, Mozambique is probably, well, it is the largest exporter of power in the region, and it has successfully now installed. It's done about 3 solar plants in the last 18 months in other parts of the country. It's built one of the largest gas power plant. It commissioned the largest gas power plant 12 months ago, 450 megawatt unit, and it now has plans. I think they were running around COP26 with a 1,500 megawatt hydro plant that they're looking to produce. So you're dealing in a part of the world that is, this is not new for them. They understand the power game. We're certainly not the pioneers in negotiating the agreements and trying to get banks comfortable. There are precedent transactions and recent ones that we can rely on. That is why, again, it comes back from a regional perspective. I think if you're going to play this power game, Mozambique is a very exciting region because of its distribution, its strategic distribution position. And, within that, we're close to that infrastructure. And we're in this position, I guess, this unique position where we're not starting. Had we not done the work on the coal plant, this would have taken us 18 months to get to where we are today. We've done it in 6.
Yeah, and instead it tells you 6. So another question the investors would want, and my last question, how much skin in the game have you got?
So how much skin have I got in the game? That's a great question too, Kevin, and it's one I get asked all the time. So I do have shares in the game. I've also got a loan. I've got quite a few loans currently sitting within the company. My total number there is probably in the region. I think I'm probably sitting around £300,000 at the moment with an investment in that. That's all public information, so it's not.
Yeah.
It's easy for people to get. I'd like to do more. I would. Unfortunately, what we've been doing is earlier this year, we basically, I think in January, we announced that we had cash until June of this year. And basically, what we were able to do through hook or crook, we basically managed our cash flows to extend that all the way to November to get, we wanted to get the feasibility study done and out so we could put the company in the best possible position to say, this is our new strategy. This is the value proposition. We're serious. This is not just we've done a quick little study here. This is a full-fledged feasibility study. We can stand behind these numbers with a degree of confidence. And basically, as part of that structure, myself and the rest of the management team took significant pay cuts to get there, between 40 and 50%. So although we're not buying stock, we are sort of trying to support the business by not taking cash out of the business, which has generally been our approach, although that's not necessarily always appreciated by investors. I think they'd rather I was paid a full salary and bought shares.
I think quite a few of the non-execs took quite a large position in the recent places, so that shows.
Oh, they're very supportive. Yeah, look, this is a company. So I guess we're a long way of saying here that this is a company where I think investors can take comfort that the board and management team are fully aligned here. Yeah. You've got our largest 2 shareholders have participated in almost every placing. They sit on the board. I don't think the directors have taken a salary in 4 years from this business. I think everybody understands that, whilst we're trying to get these things done, this is not a cushy job position. This is a position where we've got some very exciting milestones ahead of us, and we've got to position the company so that it's lean and mean to get what it needs to get done. Yeah. And what we've seen historically, so we talk about loans in the business there. When the markets haven't been there to support the company, the directors, including myself, have generally come forward and lent money into the business to make sure that we can keep the lights on. So the board and management team probably hold around about 25% of this business, Good. Including myself.
Yeah.
And again, all of the debt that sits within the company is owned by shareholders. So it's all shareholders and directors. So if you will, the alignment between the equity holders, the debt holders, and the management team and board is very much entrenched. And
that debt can be converted into equity or not?
It can, yes.
Yeah.
The important thing there is that, look, we did a deal earlier this year where one of the loans needed to be, had matured. And actually we went to the market to try and understand what share price, we would convert it into equity at. And because it was related party transactions, we had to do a whole host of tests and what have you. And the scary part was that when we were looking at, we were looking at the markets, we always talk to the brokers and what have you. We were seeing deals being done at 50% discounts to market. And that's just not where we just didn't want to be anywhere near that. And that's not, it's not the right message. It's not it's just not how we want to be perceived as operating. So it does have a conversion. What I would say though, is that what we've built into the conversion mechanism is that the company can buy back 50% of the conversion at its selection. And that's basically to make sure that people see that, if the share price is hanging low, like it is at the moment, and people, and someone wanted to take advantage of that, if that price was considered too dear, the company can go and buy half of that back.
Your focus is now obviously shifts to engaging with potential off-takers, which is obviously announced in the RNS process. That I think is due to start in November, so imminently. And in parallel, the company has submitted the preferred transmission connection solution. So do you want to just explain what shareholders can look forward to in terms of news flow in the coming months?
Yeah, sure. I think we try to get this message across in all the RNSs, because this is where we're excited for the opportunity here, right? There are two critical milestones that we need to achieve. The first one is to get approval of our grid integrations, to how we can get that power onto the grid, because any off-taker is only really going to take us seriously if we can get the power to them. With that regard, we have finished a transmission study. We submitted it to the relevant authorities in Mozambique. We hope that will be approved during Q1 next year. And we're fairly confident that, I think what's interesting about that is, again, we're in a distribution hub. That study actually looked at 6 different connection options before selecting a preferred one. Now, very few projects that have the luxury of saying, I've got 6 different routes to connect into the grid. That we're fairly confident that we'll get support on at least 2 of those. And that's a critical piece. The next piece is with the off-takers is, as I've said to you earlier on in this call, for an off-taker to engage with you seriously, they want to see that the thing is technically sound. They want to see that the economics make sense, and they want a clear, quick program to be able to deliver the project. With us delivering the feasibility study, we're now in a position to have those serious off-take discussions. That being said, we announced this project back in June of this year, and as early as we announced the intention to launch this project, we already started engaging with potential off-takers. So this is not a case of us putting out a request for proposals or going and doing a big beauty parade to try and identify.
Don't say any more, Hanno. You've already said enough. Don't say any more. I'm joking.
What I'm trying to say is that we're at that stage. Those are the milestones. So transmission connection, confirmation of a bankable off-taker. Those are major, major de-risking events for this business. It's, in my view, that's, when you look at those NPV figures, that will reduce the discount that you if you're trying to work out what is this thing worth, those are fundamental de-risking milestones that bring you closer to achieving that NPV.
Really?
And I think critically to that is something that we should have done during Q1 of next year.
I know Kev's got a burning question to ask you on the theme of the roast, so go and ask it, Kev.
Okay, so this is the Sunday roast, and you will go out on the Sunday roast podcast. So if you had your choice, what would be your Sunday roast?
Oh, that's easy. Some roast beef and roast potatoes, 100%. Good old English roast.
And lashings of gravy or not?
Drowning.
And
So
nice really strong horseradish as well that gets you nose.
Drowning. Well, I grew up in the UK. I grew up with Sunday roasts. It's something I miss greatly. And you think about it.
That's good. You have to go out and get some meat tomorrow then and make one for We will stop the recording.
In this part of the world, they like something slightly different to that. They want it on an open braai.
The braai.
Yeah, open braai
sausages.
And it must be dark. The what's it? The boerewors. You guys have got that to look forward to in a couple of weeks' time.
Indeed.
Hanno, Pengilly, CEO of Ncondezi, thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
So, how's the week been in general then? What are the standout RNSs, news pieces? I think for me, there was the Emerson, EML, announced salt and potash MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings, which has moved the price pretty well. I think that was on Tuesday. And then we obviously saw BSF Enterprise, one that we've had a Shay on recently, and Jeff. They announced a partnership with a leading cell growth company, Pengilly. They'll work together to optimize the effectiveness of animal-free cultures to reduce the dependence on other protein compounds, increase yields, and lower overall costs. This is expected to pave the way for advances in cellular agriculture in the UK and worldwide. So, do you think that's a good collaboration there? Do you think that'll expedite things?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the whole city mix is one of the big things with BSF. As it is, as well as obviously creating the meat themselves, but being in control of the thing that actually helps the cells grow to become the meat product is going to obviously exponentially help them financially. And if this collaboration helps the thing work more effectively, as in the city mix, then yeah, it's going to be good. And obviously they're going to have distribution partners as well. So yeah, it could expedite the whole thing. I'm excited about BSF. I have to say, I think the valuation on that stock compared to US counterparts, and actually the reality is they're not even doing the same thing. This is new tech, is glaring. Companies like this in the US be worth hundreds of millions already, and we're around what is it, 10 million, something like that. 12 million maybe, so the chances of this growing significantly even before next year, early next year, when they're talking about having the tests of a bigger piece of meat and people eating it and seeing what it's like, etc., is I think very likely.
What about extract resources? That was the Racecourse prospect updated mineral resource estimate. The 1.1 million tons, I think, was the number that people kind of focused on, wasn't it? Well, obviously, we interviewed Colin. What do you make of that? Do you think that's been a panic sell, a bit overdone now?
Well, I've tried to take a step back and think to myself, if there wasn't any expectations put in place about 2 million tons of contained copper, how would the market react to a company saying they have 1.1 million tons of contained copper? And I think the reaction would be very, very different to what has happened. That's my take on it. I mean, I think it's almost expectations were higher, but actually there isn't many 1.1 million ton contained copper potential mines out there, and especially open pit and the top layer of that 191 million tons is high grade and close to the surface. So yeah, I'm a bit puzzled, really. But at the same time, I understand people's reaction. Oh, we were expecting more. But virtually none of that was priced into the share price anyway. Yeah. The gold alone would be worth what, in my view, what the share price is like before the announcement. And then the share price dropped, obviously, by what, 25%?
Yeah, so it went down to like 2.3, I think, at its lowest, but 2.4 or something. But I mean, it hasn't taken into, they've still got to model Ascot really yet as well, and do a proper mineral resource estimate for that. So that kind of like that, that could move it up to the 1.5, 1.6 or 1, that area, couldn't it? If people are getting fixated on that. So it looks very good actually. I think it's a good opportunity now.
Yeah, I mean, at this price, I think you're not paying for any of Racecourse or Ascot in that share price. I think that share price effectively says there is no value to those assets at all, which I think is a bit ludicrous, because even a small mine with a 200 million tons of contained copper, that they dug it out as a pit and just did this and didn't go any further, is worth significant amounts.
As you say, the Manica project itself, the gold pours, the alluvials are worth probably the cap now, right?
Yeah, and they've also got the other gold project as well. So, market's still not reacting very well to news, is it? Even though we are having some good positives. So hopefully this, the shares will have their day, in terms of people realizing that there is true value there. I mean, when we spoke to Colin, he was like shocked. He was like, why didn't it go up? The scenario was that this, I believe, is about expectation rather than about the reality of what it's actually worth today. And yeah, we don't know that, but it is worth something for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, while I'm still on the subject of Colin, why don't we talk about the Galileo resources, the completion of resource delineation drilling at Ncondezi copper project in Zambia. Good RNS, wasn't it?
It was good RNS. We might actually be visiting this project, I think, in next year, in January, February. Yeah, there's a lot of rumors on the boards that actually this is very close to Jubilee, a Jubilee site where they're basically doing lots of what's the word I'm looking for? tailings and the different things for copper. So this Ncondezi would add high grade copper to Jubilee's mix possibly. So there's a good chance there that obviously Colin, having been involved with Jubilee, and we obviously know Leon as well, that could be a joint venture that would mean the capex on Ncondezi would be drastically reduced, because really all you're doing is digging it up and trucking it to the Jubilee plant.
Anything else that piqued your interest? I think the Alchemy Capital was one you wanted to talk about. They had a monster RNS, didn't they, on Friday?
Yeah, I mean, planning permission granted. All systems go, basically, it looks. I mean, it went crazy first thing and then settled back down again. Share price-wise, Shard put out a note, which we will pass around. I think it's in the Alchemy group already. But we got it, and they basically they increased their target price to, I think it was 1,200 pence or more. Currently sitting around the 280 pence, and that was just on one train. So there's going to be the potential for 1, 2, 3 trains, I think, of systems that will produce this form of lithium that is then required for the EV batteries. So yeah, it's all looking good for jobs in Teesside as well, and I can't see much stopping that train, pun intended, because that's what they call it. We've got the wind power offshore that they're going to be tying into. So it's going to be a very green project for green EVs, if you like. So I think it really is going to be, it's going to be a good one, I think.
What about our visit then? Do you want to talk about, we had a good visit on Thursday to Technology Minerals, 2 of the sites. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, it was bloody cold. I think it's the best way to put it.
It really was.
My feet disappeared.
I don't think I've driven in that sort of biblical rain for a long time. I think last time was in France. When it rains in France, it properly rains.
Yeah,
but I remember driving and the wipers not being fast enough, and going past trucks, and you couldn't see the markings. It was pretty horrendous. But yeah, it was good, wasn't it? It's good to meet the team, really. I think when you meet the team, the guys who are on the ground, it gives you a completely different perspective, doesn't it, of a company?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just landed in from Cairo, so the weather was quite interesting, obviously. But yeah, we're going to put something out next week, I think, which will give people a good overview, some videos and some pictures of the things. The sites, they're not spectacular. They do what they do, but they're all ready to rock and roll pretty much. Certainly the lead acid battery one is literally waiting for approval. They've started basically storing the lead acid batteries. The big ones, the commercial ones, they've started to do that.
Yeah, they're like the sort of forklift type, aren't they? Or the ones you get in hospitals are massive, that you can actually pull out the lead, the actual cells. Can't you see them? They're
So the revenue will start to be produced from that, I think, from next week. That we saw and took pictures of the bales of the lead that they pulled out of those. So revenue is going to begin very shortly. Might not be massive, but I mean, I think the numbers they were talking about were that it could easily get up to £500,000 of lead batteries going through there in value, and they'll make about 20% to 25% on that. So could be £100,000 a month coming in there in short time. And obviously, if the machine gets switched on, and it's a completely different ball game, the maximum loadage on that is 96 tons a day of lead acid batteries. And the equipment's not sophisticated particularly, but it does what it does, and it gets the lead and all the different
It was an impressive
parts.
machine, bit of kit, wasn't it? Like the conveyor belt and the storage. I think we said 12 tons in per hour. Would give 5 tons of lead oxide per hour out. So it's about a 40% yield, wasn't it? I think we discussed.
Yeah, but that's lead oxide. You then get 40% also of metals and other saleable assets as well.
Yeah.
So it's overall about 80% recovery rate, and you can even sell the bits of plastic as well. So yeah, it's impressive. Why on earth the what do we call them? Environmental agency are not just saying, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know. And the lithium one is the same, isn't it? I mean, the lithium machine is more impressive.
Yeah, it's wow, isn't it? I mean, I think that the key takeaway there is that they are potentially going to be taking batteries that, as you mentioned, that could be defective. That's why they're there. They could be live batteries, still have some charge in them. So when they go into the shredder, they have to go into like an inert environment, like a vacuum, remove all the oxygen. It's a vacuum, so that they can't have a heat runaway event or explode. And then they're shredded, aren't they? And then they're broken down into individual different sizes. You've got the black mass, you've got the ferrous, you've got the iron element of it, you've got paper, and it's quite impressive how it separates all those different kind of byproducts out, isn't it?
Yeah, and then obviously there's going to be income streams for pretty much all of those. There's not really much waste going on there at all. So again, environmental agency, yalla, hurry up, get on with it, because basically it's within 1 or 2 weeks of the environmental agency saying it's okay, it's ready to go. And then we went into the other sort of big warehouse where that was the Lieback facility. The Halo boxes, which, all things aside, I really do think that the transportation of these type of batteries is something pretty much everybody's missed. There's 2 or 3 companies doing it, but literally they're just creating a small box and none of the issues that this Halo box has. Or none of the benefits that this Halo box has.
That box can handle up to 2,000 degrees C internally and only get up to about 60 degrees on the outside when it's in those temperatures.
No, absolutely. Well, as you said, I mean, you'll see it in the videos when we release them, but it's like compartmentalized, isn't it? It's like steel box inside steel box inside steel box with. And
to meet Harris and Lowe, Harris Lowe, the 2 gentlemen, Spencer Lowe and Jody Harris. It was really nice to actually meet them and let them explain the technology, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, characters galore, and but the reality is, without people like that, you can't run a business like this.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of experience in this type of business, especially the lead acid batteries. They ran their own business and had some unfortunate circumstances, and they're now, TM1 shareholders, and they're in for the ride, if you like, to make this work. And without them, this proposition probably isn't going to work as well. So, yeah, I'm pleased to have met them. And obviously we met Joe as well, who's one of the board members of Recyclers, who is now 100% or going to be 100% owned by Tech Minerals. So, yeah, it was great to see it on the ground and what's going to happen. And, it can't happen soon enough that revenue starts pouring out.
Yeah.
I mean, revenue is going to
get them online and then get some offtakes in place, and it's off to the races, really, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, for the valuation that's put on it now, it's crazy. I mean, the valuation of the lithium recycling machine that they have IP on, it's probably worth the market cap. When I was walking away from it thinking, they've got the IP on this, so basically that's a business that
and the boxes and the Halo
and the boxes, the IP on the machine alone. You're going to have gigafactories, as they explained to us. As the gigafactory sets up, a lot of the batteries have to be basically thrown away, because when the gigafactory first starts, for the first year to 2 years, the percentage of batteries that can actually be accepted is quite low until they get the process correct. So all of those, they don't want to lose the material. They will all go into recycling plants that will be, IP'd by Tech Minerals, and they will have them on the site. So they will have them on the site. They will process them. They'll be there for a couple of years, and then Tech Minerals will move that machinery to the next gigafactory that wants to do the same thing. So, yeah, that was a bit of a wow for me. It was like, my goodness, this is going to be some amount of throughput and some amount of money that you're going to be able to create from these machines. So, yeah, all in all, it was very good.
Good. Anything else on the horizon or on the agenda? I mean, we've got there's some AGMs coming up next week, I think. MC Mining, Europa Metals, and Castillo Copper as well. So
yeah, the only other thing that happened this week was that Gareth Southgate decided to play an extremely boring team, and we didn't attack the USA, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, that was a shocker, wasn't it? Sorry, it was very dull game. I feel robbed of 90 minutes, or not even more than 90 minutes. Like 2 hours of my life,
You've got Phil Foden on the bench. You've got Trent Alexander on the bench. You've got, who else have you got on the bench?
Yeah, why didn't he make those changes? Bizarre.
You've got even Manchester United boy who came on late, but like, why give him 10 minutes?
Rashford came on.
Rashford came on 10 minutes. Yeah. I mean, Sterling was useless the whole game, and then you put him on. I don't understand his ethos. No. I accept his central defenders. I mean, basically, it was like watching John Stones and Harry Maguire pass it to each other for 90 minutes. Because I don't know how many times they passed it to each other, but it was a bloody lot. It was crazy, and compared to what they did against Iran, I just don't understand. They just didn't attack them. It's as simple as that. They just sat back. We will see.
Yeah, there's been some, as we said earlier, there's been some shockers, but there always is, isn't there? You always get those upsets, but it seems to have been a few more in the group stages than there has been in 3 or 4 of serious upsets. The likes of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and the
RGs lost.
Oh, the RGs, that was superb to this.
Germany lost. It's interesting. We'll see what happens. I mean, England should qualify. Wales look like they're doomed.
Just need a draw, don't we, against Wales, and it's a done deal. But it's never, never say never. In this, you can't.
No, we can lose against Wales as long as we don't lose by too many. So
yeah, I guess that. But we really want to draw a minimum.
Yeah, I want to beat them, win the group, and go through no problems. But let's see what happens. It's very, very strange having a World Cup in November and December. It's bizarre.
We were saying that. We went down the pub on Friday and sort of, sat watching it, and there wasn't half the chanting and the buzz that there was in the summer, when everyone was outside dancing on the tables and everything. It was very muted.
Yeah, it's you're not wrong, but I just hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
In terms of, the whole world has to change just for that. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
In London next week, meeting various people. Looking forward to it, actually.
Yeah, there's a few people who are going to be. I think we're going to be having.
One thing we haven't mentioned: the webinar on Monday, the Ben webinar. We need to mention that. What are your 6 p.m. Monday night? Have a look in the groups. There is actually an RNS reach that went out with the link on it. So if you want to register for that and you want to come and visit or attend an evening with Adam Wilson, CEO of Ben's Creek, then please register, and we'll look forward to seeing you hosting you on Monday.
Yeah, there's also another one in London actually, but this is a live one, not anything to do with us. With Alex Walker, Eastar Resources, on Wednesday at 6:00, I think.
I think VSA Capital are hosting a few, aren't they, as well? I think Hydrogen Utopia are on with them on, ironically, on the same evening as England play, which is probably poor timing.
Yeah, that's a smart one, isn't it? Yeah, at the same time as well.
Exactly the same time, yeah, 7 p.m. onwards.
Good luck with that one. Yeah, so there's a few things happening. So if you're interested in more information on that, we're gonna, as I say, we had the visit to Tete Mins, and we'll get some more stuff out next week for that, so you can see it for yourself and have a good rest of the weekend.
Enjoy.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.